Hello and welcome. My name's Ryan Johnson, and this is the Saltcast. Today, I welcome back Paul. Paul, good morning.
Good morning, Ryan. Glad to be here.
And yes, I'm sure you will be, especially after I announce who our special guest is today. And really, this woman needs no introduction because if you have ever searched out anything sales tax, you have likely seen Diane's name or Sales Tax Institute because she is everywhere. She is the original sales tax nerd. In fact, she just told me that the sales tax nerd is trademarked. So she owns that. So which is pretty incredible to me. Diane, welcome.
Thanks, Ryan and Paul. It's great to be with you today. I'm excited to talk about all kinds of things sales tax nerdiness.
Yes. So,
I love it.
Diane, if you could, you have such a rich history in sales tax where it actually makes it exciting and interesting to hear about. I would love to hear your story, how you got started, what's kept you within the sales tax world and where you plan on going.
Sure. Well, I do have a kind of a little bit of a longer history, although not in many places. So, I always used to say I started my sales tax career after I graduated college in my first job with the Department of Revenue. But as I started thinking about it, it actually started the summer I graduated. I didn't start working for the state of Kansas until the fall, but I actually interned after the summer after I graduated for a utility company in Kansas City and ended up being placed into the tax department. You just got randomly placed in different departments. I had interned there my freshman summer where I worked in the accounting department. Ryan, you won't know this. Paul, maybe. I was a calculator operator for an entire summer where all I did was add numbers on a 10 key. So,
No kidding.
no kidding, craziness. So that wasn't sales tax related, but
Google's calculator operator. Got it.
operator. But then, the next 2 summers in college, I stayed on campus and worked on campus and took classes. But then I graduated and I didn't have a job. This is the mid 80s. It was a little bit tough to get a job when I graduated. And so I was contemplating grad school and I got a job, another internship that year with the same utility company and placed in the tax department. And this is going to be hard to believe, but this is early computer time. So it was Lotus 123. We didn't have Excel. Everybody didn't have a computer. We didn't have cell phones. And I learned Lotus. I think I'd taken a class in college. But while I was there, I actually developed an exemption certificate management system in Lotus 123.
No
Now,
kidding.
of course, I wish I had taken that with me. I might,
Right?
but I used macros and all kinds of things. So I now say that I actually started in the sales tax field in that summer. So I was there for about 4 or 5 months, and then I got a call from the Kansas Department of Revenue, and I joined them as a sales tax auditor in their Topeka office. And while I was there, so I say the exemption certificate tool because that led to me being identified at the Department of Revenue when they were ready to move from handwriting audit work papers. So I know you guys deal with a lot of audits with your clients. Think of if you would have gotten a handwritten, scribbled audit report instead of a typed Excel spreadsheet that you get. That's what I did when I started doing audits. We were on 8-column paper, and they decided that they wanted to computerize that process. And because of the work I had done with the utility company, which is a big taxpayer in Kansas, my new audit manager at Kansas had heard about me from the utility company. And so as a first-year auditor, I got selected to be the person that developed the computerized work paper program for the Department of Revenue.
Golly.
And so I got to do, large case audits, small case audits as I developed all of that system. And it was really kind of fun to do that. And that's where kind of my tax technology. So, today we call them tax technologists.
Hmm.
I was a tax
Hmm.
technologist before there was such a concept of it, so
Hmm.
I've kind of been a tax technologist since 1985, which is really scary to say. Um, so I ended up spending about 2.5 years with the Kansas Department of Revenue. And then I got approached by a taxpayer that I was doing an audit on, and that moved me to Chicago. And I spent a little over a year with the Quaker Oats Company in their sales tax field, in their sales tax department, and took some of that technology skills and built a customized fixed asset use tax accrual system for them with our IT department. And then in the late 80s, the accounting firms were starting to develop state tax groups.
Hmm.
And so I joined Arthur Andersen as the eighth person in the Chicago state tax group. And ended up while I was there doing a lot of different things, but one of the things that I really loved was the opportunity to be the sales tax representative to the state tax education function. And so I was responsible for the development of the sales tax training for the entire Arthur Andersen firm, and then involved in teaching for the time I was there. So I spent about 7.5 years with Arthur Andersen. The last probably year, think Y2K. Again, I don't know if you guys
Yep.
were around
I
when
remember.
all of that
I
was
remember.
happening. I know you were around, but were you like around in
We were
Y2K?
babies, infants.
Yeah.
Oh, well, come on.
And so Y2K is happening. And, back then everybody was on, old mainframes. And, it was in the, mid to late 90s, people were moving to SAP and Oracle and other big ERP systems that didn't have tax functions. And, the other thing you have to remember is back then there were only two tax engine companies, Vertex and Taxware, which is now Sovos.
Yep.
Didn't have the myriad of technology solutions that are out there. And so Vertex came to a couple of the accounting firms, Arthur Andersen being one of them, and asked if we would be interested in becoming trainers and help them train their customers how to use their software. And because they just didn't have a big enough training group.
Yeah.
So I was the lead person from Arthur Andersen. And so I helped kind of develop that. And I saw a great opportunity for Arthur Andersen to start doing sales tax technology, because
Yeah.
these customers that we're teaching were like, okay, we need help. So I saw this as a great opportunity. At this point, I was, 6 years in. I had been a manager for 5 years, and I went to my partner and said, "Hey, I think this is a great opportunity. I think we should develop a tax technology practice." And he said, "I don't think that's going to go anywhere, Diane.
Yep.
Just don't think
Oh,
so." And I said, "I think it will." And that's what got me to leave Arthur Andersen in 1996 and start my own firm, Yetter Consulting Services. And we, from day one, Vertex didn't want to lose me as a trainer. So I had, an engagement with them to be a contract trainer, which put me 2 weeks a month in front of customers. And as you might guess, there was very little time before I had people saying, "Can we hire you to help us
Right.
implement?"
Yeah.
And so that happened, and we became very much known as a tax technology firm. Back then there wasn't content in the tax engine, so the taxability rules, we had to research it all. So that's kind of how my firm ended up growing, because we had to do all the research in order to populate the rules. But my time at Andersen when I was the doing the training development the other thing you have to realize is back then, the only place you could really get quality sales tax education was through IPT. And if you weren't an IPT member, you couldn't go to the training. And so that is what led me to create the Sales Tax Institute. And so we started doing live in-person training in 1997, in the spring of 97. And at that time, we had 3 classes that we taught: a half-day sales tax concepts class, a 3-day basics of sales and use tax class, and a 3-day advanced sales tax workshop. And so we've been running those since 1997. We stopped the concepts class. We just weren't getting, enough people to warrant that. But, we converted to, we've been doing webinars since 2012, which kind of predate when most people started doing webinars. We're NASBA certified to give CPE credit, have been since day one. Have a great following. We now have on-demand webinars. And then our newest offering, which I'm thrilled with because, you guys work in this field.
Mm-hmm.
Sales tax is dependent upon having a community of people that you can go to when you need the inside scoop, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so we created the Sales Tax Nerd community. It kind of came out of our Sales Tax Nerd concept. As Ryan said, it is trademarked. It is ours. I am the original, the real Sales Tax Nerd. But we have a whole community of sales tax nerds. So I am happy for everybody to call themselves a sales tax nerd, because that's what our sales tax nerd community is all about. It is about having a safe place where you can come and ask the questions that you need to ask. We have a lot of fun with what we do. It comes with training, so you get all of our webinars. You get a platform where you can post questions. I was in there last night answering questions for people. And the community answers each other's questions. So it's not just me that's in there answering questions. We have lots of people doing it. And there's fun things that we do, and you get office hours with me. We have sponsors that come in and do educational sessions and demos of their products. And it's a great way to do a couple things. One, we use this to help recognize that sales tax is actually a really valuable, important part of a business. We actually have a Sales Tax Nerd Award. So it is a competitive application process, and once a year we name a Sales Tax Nerd of the Year. So that is great fun. And it's just a lot of fun. And we would love to have some of the Peisner family join us. So we are going to give your members a discount. So we'll have that for you, that you'll be able to check that out and potentially join us. So I've been doing that, and in doing that has given a lot of visibility to us. We've come into contact with a lot of people involved in different things. Between Streamlined, we're very involved with the MTC, and just doing a lot of public speaking. And probably the highlight of my career was last summer. It might even be exactly a year to the day. It might have been June 14th last year. I was asked to testify before the Senate Finance Committee in Washington, D.C. about the impacts of Wayfair on small business. So that was just a thrill.
So cool.
So that's me. So
it's incredible. I love it. I love the sales tax nerd community. I love the fire and the passion, but I've been a big fan of Diane's for, I don't know, going on a decade or more now, since I learned about you and met you first at the Vertex conference, or the Vertex event. And I've been a big follower of yours. And I remember a year ago when you're at the Community of Finance testifying, for remote sellers, for small businesses, being an advocate for them. It's awesome to just, ride in your wake, if I could, and the impact that you've had amongst businesses and especially small businesses, remote sellers, all businesses really in the consulting world. So it's awesome.
Well, thanks. Yeah. But, you guys have done a great job too. We've been you've been in business a little bit longer than us. We're coming up on our
Yeah.
27th anniversary. I think you guys did 30 last year, right?
Yep. Yeah.
Um,
It'll be 31 years tomorrow, June 15th.
oh, that's fabulous.
That's right.
Yeah, we're in August, and
Oh, there you
you
go.
know, I think back to when, you know, your firm started and my firm started. You know, we were kind of groundbreaking in what we did. You know,
Yeah.
there were not really firms out there doing sales tax. You know,
Exactly
I
right.
think there were maybe one or two others that existed at the time.
Yep.
And it was, you know, working in industry, you know, even when I was at the state, the sales tax auditors, your goal was to be promoted to become an income tax auditor. Like
Yeah.
right before I left the state, I was getting trained on doing income tax audits, and I
Yeah.
had no desire to do income tax.
Yes.
And, you know, it was like, but that's the promotion. Same thing
Yes.
when I was in industry. It
Yes.
was, you know, the sales tax people, you did it for a couple of years and then you got promoted to
Yeah.
income
It was a
tax.
step up.
I never wanted to get promoted to income tax.
Yeah.
And, you know, so that's why we do sales tax. And you know, now there's lots of us out there.
Yeah,
There's
for sure.
more
More and more
competition.
popping up.
Yep. And it's been really fun to see, you know, see how things have changed, even, you know, the
Yeah.
technology and how many vendors there are. And I remember in, you know, 2000 when Sabrix, you know,
Hmm.
now owned by Thomson Reuters, came on the market and how that shook up the industry, you know, crazily. And then, you know, when Avalara joined, and now, you know, there's a whole bunch of them popping up. You know, there's a bunch of new ones out there now,
Hmm.
and it's, to me, it's super exciting to see those changes happening and seeing that there's options for
Yeah.
businesses to find a solution that best fits their needs.
100%. It's funny your story as you talked a little bit about Arthur Andersen. I remember Jerry and Andy having a similar experience in Arthur Andersen, and they decided to move on from Arthur Andersen before the whole collapse, right? And they were made fun of. Hey, there's no way you're going to survive in a sales tax specialized world in this market. Well, we think there's an opportunity, and so we're going to give it a whirl. And I remember Andy's story about having, you know, just a little bit of money in the bank account, and him and Andy just starting the firm, or him and Jerry's just starting the firm and specializing in sales and use tax. And lo and behold, yeah, here you are, 31 years later. There's a lot to be said there. It's quite cool in my opinion. I think it's
Yeah,
cool.
I was told that when I left the state.
Yeah,
I was told that when I left Quaker Oats. I was told it when I left Arthur Andersen. There is no future in sales tax. You are
yeah,
insane. You will not
yeah,
make it. You will be
yeah,
back. We
yeah.
promise you,
Oh,
you will be back. That's what
Yep,
I was told in all the places that I left.
I
So
believe it. What's also really exciting or cool to me is just the fire and the passion that you have and have always had in the sales tax just world. People, I chat with businesses personally on a daily basis who we consult and help get set up or help figure out problems or whatever it may be in the sales and use tax space. And they say it's like a breath of fresh air. You know, there's some peace of mind that comes, and there's a lot of
mhm.
confidence that comes from collaborating one with another. And I can't explain it. I can't explain where the passion comes from, where the fire comes from. I see it in you. I see it in your crew, in your team. I love your post. It's just it's I don't know how to explain it, but there's just a lot of passion and fire that comes from you and just the joy in helping people understand the sales tax world and what it means for them specifically in their specific company, what they're buying, what they're selling. Are you collecting tax? Are you not? Are you paying sales tax? Are you not? Really, all things, right? Sales and use tax,
Yeah.
and there's just a lot of passion that comes from it, and I love that from you.
Oh, well, thank you, Paul. It's wonderful to hear. You know, I just it is my life.
Yeah,
You know, I've been doing this for so long. And I think, you know, one of the reasons I started Sales Tax Institute was, yes, there's obviously a financial aspect to it. Um, Early on, it was not a financial benefit. sales
Right?
taxes, because everything was done in person. So,
Yeah.
when you add in catering costs and travel costs and all those sorts of things,
Yeah.
um, but education and teaching and training,
Yeah.
um, when I was a kid, you know, when summer hit, we played school,
Yeah.
and being, I'm from a family of five. My brother is much younger, but there were four of us girls, and I'm number two. And so my older sister and I, we were the teachers, and the two younger were the students. And then there were little neighborhood kids that came over. We played school in the summer. Um,
It's
you know, and
fantastic.
and from every job I had, from high school jobs, I worked at a ice cream store. I was the trainer. In
Yeah.
college. I did stuff where I did training. I worked at Hardee's when I was in college, and I was the trainer there. At the state, when I built the system, I had to train everybody. At
Yeah.
Quaker, I developed a training program. At Anderson, in training. So training is the other thing that has been a constant in my career.
Yeah.
And I love when the light bulb goes off. When we've got people that we're talking to, whether it's in a class or it's a client, just like you said,
Right.
where all of a sudden they go, I get it. Um,
Oh. Yep.
you know, and also their sense of relief
Yeah.
when they they find somebody like your firm or our firm.
Yeah.
I think one of the things we have in common is, we tell people legally what they need to do,
Yep.
but we're also very cognizant of the practical.
Right.
What can you, what's really possible, and
Exactly.
what can you do that gets you to your business owner's comfort level
Exactly.
of, all right, I can't be 100% riskless,
Yep.
right? There's
Yep.
some level of risk that you have to be able to accept
Yep.
as a business owner.
Yep.
And helping talk through that with them, and them realizing that they have a partner
Yeah.
with them that understands their business, understands the laws,
Yeah.
can help explain what is real risk,
Yep.
what is moderate risk, and what is, I wouldn't worry about that.
Yep.
Um, penny rounding.
Yep.
I'm not that worried about penny rounding. Yeah,
Nope.
there's going to be some rounding things that are going to be there, but you know
It'll be
what?
all
It's
right.
penny rounding.
Yeah.
Don't worry about that. But hey, you're collecting tax and you're not registered. Big risk. Red flag.
Yeah.
Orange jumpsuit.
Yes.
Risk.
Yes.
Um,
Exactly.
that those are, you've got kind of that spectrum
Yeah.
of what you have to deal with.
Yeah.
And I try to build that into all of our conversations, whether it's at Sales Tax Institute in one of our classes, client engagements, or even, as you said, the posts that we put out.
Yep.
We try to make it real for people, is I
Yeah.
think what I have really tried to build in my team and build in our reputation.
100%. I mean, you have to be practical. I mean, you're dealing with humans, you're dealing with individuals, right? You're dealing with people who started a company, founded a company, officers of a company who are just trying to, turn a profit and make a dollar and live in this world. Not somebody who even remotely has an idea of sales tax. And so there's a lot of confidence that comes from speaking with an expert who knows legally what is the requirement. But then from a practical standpoint, you're a business owner. I mean, you took risks
Mhm.
when you started the business. So here's what you're up against, and here's the pros, here's the cons, here's some, options. But yeah, I like the risk levels. Obviously, that orange jumpsuit everybody's afraid of. Nobody wants to commit fraud. Nobody wants to defraud the state, right? But there's a lot of comfort that comes from understanding that.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and I think that, learning the sales tax world is a huge value add, not only to yourself, but if you're in industry, to your company, to your CPA firm, or
Mhm.
whoever you're doing work for. It's a huge value add to yourself. And it's really important, especially nowadays with Wayfair going on and the different laws changing. So, Diane, my last question for you
Mhm.
today is, what do you see what's on your radar? What's coming up next that we should be looking out for in the sales tax world?
That's a great question, Ryan. And there's a couple of things that I think are important for people to be aware of. The first is really, as we come up, crazily next week, a week from today is Wayfair's 5th anniversary.
Yeah.
Can you believe
Man,
it?
that's
No.
crazy.
Yeah, we actually teach our basics of sales and use tax class in June. And the day the decision came down was day 2 of our class in 2018. We had just taught everything about Nexus the day before because we teach it on day 1. And, day 2, it was okay at 9, whatever in the morning, the decision came down. It's like, okay, everything we taught you yesterday, we got to undo
Yeah.
and do that. But
It
we
still
luckily
exists. It's still applicable, but don't throw
it
it out, right? It's,
exactly.
but we're going to
We've
add
got
to it. We
exactly,
got another
exactly.
prong to the fork, if you will.
Yeah. And so we have had some fun with that. Uh, our day 1 of class will be on Wayfair birthday next week, and we have some fun things planned. So keep an eye out. I think there's going to be a LinkedIn Live event that may be happening.
Yes. There we
So
go.
so watch for that. Could be lots of fun things, some props and other things that might happen.
There we
Um,
go.
but when we think about what has happened since then, the Wayfair decision um, was premised on a set of facts that existed within South Dakota. That the court thought made it so that there was not a significant burden on interstate commerce and on remote sellers. And over the last 5 years, different states have implemented different things that are probably pushing that envelope of what is burdensome. And one of the things that I talked about in that Senate testimony was, just the myriad of different combinations of rules that the states have. We've got a great chart on our website with all of the different rules on what is economic nexus. And, what we saw is, the first states that enacted back in 2018, they followed South Dakota, the
Right.
$100,000 or 200 transactions, predominantly with a gross sales test. And
Yep.
then we saw some states migrate away from that. We
Yep.
luckily had the 3 biggest states in the country, so California, Texas, and New York,
Yep.
that realized a $500,000 threshold was more appropriate. Then we saw a lot of states say, you know what, we think 200 transactions, that's just pulling in a lot of really too small of businesses.
Yeah.
So they went with just 100,000. We've got the 2 outliers with Alabama and Mississippi that are at 250,000.
Yep.
But then what we saw some of those early states like Washington and Wisconsin and Maine and Colorado even that had enacted that 100,000 or 200 transactions drop the 200 transactions.
Right.
And that to me is the right thing for the states to do.
For sure.
We just had South Dakota drop it, so that will go away here in just a couple of weeks on July 1. And then just about 10 days ago, the beginning of the month, Louisiana dropped theirs, and that'll drop off August 1. I think those are really smart moves.
Yeah.
The Streamlined Sales Tax Group is behind this. They are really pushing for all of the streamlined states to drop. I think there's a couple of others that tried to get it this session, didn't happen. I really expect we're going to see more of those fall off next year.
Yeah. Totally
And
agree.
I think that's the right decision. I mean, there
For sure.
are, we have clients that are filing that just really have no need to be filing. And the costs, I mean, you guys do returns. I'm sure
Right.
you've got people that you're filing tiny dollars of tax. And
Yep.
unfortunately, because you have to, it takes time to do those returns. There's a
Yeah.
cost doing that
Yeah.
that far exceeds the amount of tax that's
For
being
sure. Yeah, we
So
oftentimes get the question, well, is there a cheaper route we can go? Unfortunately, if I file a penny on a return or $1 million on a return, it's still going to take me the same amount of time to prepare that return, file the return, submit the payment, go through the whole
Yep.
process. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm hoping that the states look at a couple of different things. One, dropping that transaction count. Also, we've got states that exclude marketplace sales.
Yep.
Now that every state has marketplace, I'd like more states to exclude that
For
in
sure.
doing that. We've also seen some states drop the physical presence requirement or creation of
The
nexus if
warehouse.
your only inventory is particularly Amazon, so uncontrolled inventory in a
Yeah.
state. Those sorts of things, it just doesn't make sense.
Right.
Let's get those things cleaned up. So
Yeah.
I think that's the first thing, is looking at the burden on businesses overall. I
Yep.
think
For
the
sure.
other thing that's going to be important to look at, we just heard that Halstead Beed dropped their litigation against Louisiana, that it was overly burdensome because of Louisiana dropping the 200 transaction count. They don't
That's
think
good.
that they've got an argument there, so they're dropping. But we do have the second Wayfair case pending in Colorado against the home rule locals. So I think that is going to be the important thing to really keep an eye on.
Yeah.
Is Colorado, I think, has no right to be imposing economic nexus with what they're doing.
It's crazy.
Even the SUT system is not
Yes.
a viable solution.
No.
The different tax laws across all the cities with no real consolidated place to get that information, the holdouts that aren't going on to SUTs, the fact that the SUTs system is so complicated to file in,
Yes.
that none of the software companies support SUTs.
Yes.
So there's no viable way to
No.
file in SUTs unless you're going to do it all yourself, which
Exactly right.
to me is not a solution.
No.
So I think that's going to be a real interesting case to see what happens. And then probably the last thing on the tangential with Nexus is how Wayfair is spreading into non-sales tax. So the
I was going to ask you about that.
The MTC position on income tax and economic nexus for income tax, the abolishing or attempt to abolish Public Law 86272. I think that is going to be the next thing to really keep an eye on.
Yeah.
Gross receipts taxes predated Wayfair with economic nexus. We had the handful of states that have that. But I think this income tax, which when you think about sales tax, if you do it right, other than the administrative cost, sales tax is never the seller's cost, right?
Right.
If you do it right, it's a pass-through.
Exactly.
Income tax, that impacts your bottom line.
Oh, big time.
Now, in some cases, we've actually found taking the position that I have income tax nexus in more states is actually beneficial. So if you are a business in a high tax state, a California, a New York, Illinois is getting there, Arizona, Oregon, or not Arizona, Oregon, and there's some other states with really high income tax rates at the corporate level, or small businesses with your individual. You may benefit by saying, I do have income tax nexus, because now you get to source part of that income to potentially low or no tax states.
Right.
So income tax nexus is not always bad, but it is something that really impacts your bottom line. So I think watching how Wayfair and economic nexus trickles into the income tax side, I think is going to be the next thing.
Yeah.
The other thing with Nexus is the remote employees. We're all remote. We were talking about that I've got employees in a lot of different states. You've got a few states. That's the way of the world. And having a remote employee, should that really create sales tax nexus or income tax nexus? I think that's going to be the next thing that needs to be tackled.
Yeah.
Outside of that, yeah, exactly. And outside of that, I think the next big thing is the whole digital space.
Big time.
There's different organizations between Streamlined, MTC, FTA, that we're all struggling with, what is it when I buy something that I can't physically hold?
Right.
Sales tax has always been, from its histories in the 30s, a tax on stuff.
Yep.
And now we buy a lot less stuff, and we buy a lot more concepts, right?
Hmm.
Is a
Hmm.
way to think about it.
Ideas and
That's a good
thoughts.
point.
Yeah.
Ideas and services,
Yeah.
and how are states going to tax that? Streamlined has been wrangling with, if I buy something that doesn't need to be physically delivered to me, why do I need an address?
Right.
Right?
Yep.
And but Streamlined is premised on having an address.
Yep.
And so now if we go and we look at, the Wayfair case kind of permeates through a lot of this is, you can't impose a tax that puts an undue burden on businesses. Well, if states require businesses to gather personal identifiable information, your address, about you that they have no need to have, that is putting an undue burden on businesses, because
Yeah.
now I have to capture the information, I have to store the information, I have to validate the information, and I have to set up privacy protection and things within my selling environment that I do not otherwise need, right?
Right. Right.
And that is now, I think, the next thing. So
Yeah.
how do we source it? How do we define it? How
Yeah.
do we tax it? To
Phew.
me, that's the next thing that we're all going to be spending our time pulling our hair out over.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure.
Well, yeah, that's definitely, it's one thing after another. You figure something out and then
Mm-hmm.
they change it up on you.
Yep.
Okay, on to the next thing.
Yeah.
But Diane, thank you so much for being on the podcast episode today. It was an actual pleasure to have you on, and looking forward to other listeners of ours joining the sales tax nerd community.
That's
And
right.
I welcome you guys to join up.
We
Yeah,
appreciate the opportunity to offer to our listeners the discount. We'll get that discount code out as well for your sales tax nerd community. We encourage everybody to join that, just to learn a little bit more and to get in the space and just be aware of the latest and greatest news and outlets and information. So we appreciate you offering that to our listeners as well. So
sure, glad to. And it's always a pleasure to talk with other sales tax nerds, and I know you guys fall in that bucket.
that's
And
right.
so it has been a pleasure being with you, and a lot of fun, kind of going down the path of my history and
Memory
what's ahead of
lane.
us. I think
That's
there's a
right.
lot of exciting things ahead. There's no, people keep asking me, when are you going to retire? When are you going to retire? And because Andy and Jerry
About that
retired a
later.
couple years ago,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
I'm not ready.
Yeah.
There's still too much ahead of us.
It's
There's
awesome.
a lot of fun stuff yet to be done.
For sure.
Yes,
For sure.
agreed. Well,
So,
Diane, I'm sure we'll see each other again. We
yes.
definitely live in the same circles.
That's
Uh,
right.
Paul, always a pleasure.
Thanks, Ryan.
And with that, we hope to see you on another one.
All right. Thanks,
Thank you.
guys.